Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. So I've had a couple of requests on a video that will show the different use that I make out of tarot decks and oracle decks, in specific, what do I use and when. And I thought this would have been fun because I have a lot of new decks, and some of them are just on my desk and they're just waiting for me to go through the backlog, which is, unfortunately, it's winning. So backlog 1, Silvia 0. I have no idea when I'll be able to go through all of them. And on top of everything, about 6 weeks from now, I'm also going to leave and I'm going to spend almost a couple of months overseas. So it'll be fun. But in any case, let's have a look, because I think it's very subjective. So the way in which tarot readers use oracles, it's probably not the same for everyone. And I thought it would have been fun to show you how I use these decks. So the first thing that comes to mind when looking at tarot decks and also probably oracle decks is we might want to use them for divination, right? So the way in which we use tarot decks in a spread, for example, even the simple 3 cards pool that I do every week for my subscribers, it does have that kind of divination. The intention of using a deck in that context is to divine, to look into the energies that are at play, and also have a bit of an idea of what could happen in the future, or at least if there's something that we need to be aware of. So that's my main view on divination. And I think that there is a common misconception that oracle decks, for example, cannot be used for divination. I'm going to try and see whether that is actually correct. So what I've got here is a couple of decks. As you can see, I've got one tarot deck, I've got one oracle deck, and I got one deck which is neither here nor there. It's the answer deck. If you're familiar with my channel, you will see that I have been using this quite a lot because it has been requested several times by my subscribers whenever they want me to use a very specific deck to do a reading and try and get a very specific answer to a very specific question. So this is, well, on the one hand, is probably similar to a Lenormand. It's actually not a Lenormand. It's doing its own thing. But let's have a look at the tarot. So I've got here the Tarot of Oppositions. This is published by Lo Scarabeo. It's by Pierluca Zizzi and Michele D'Aloisio. They're both Italian. So the reason why I'm showing you this deck and not any other deck, because obviously when it comes to divination, you can use pretty much any RWS or RWS clone deck. You can also use Marseille. I would say any deck that doesn't specifically have a different kind of energy, which could be focusing on, for example, shadow work, inner child work, meditation, and so on and so forth. Any deck that is pretty much a RWS clone, you can be sure almost 100% that it's a pretty good deck to be used for divination. So in this case, the Tarot of Opposition is quite interesting because, well, you can see that from the get-go. So we've got the box, and in the box we've got the Hermit. So when you open it, you've got the Hermit, and you see that in the inner part of the box you also have the Hermit, but it's a different kind of configuration of the Hermit. And we will see that this deck is very particular in the sense that it gives you the opportunity to read and to learn to read cards with their reversals as well as their upright position. So let me just show you just a couple of examples. We've got here, for example, the 6 of Swords. Sorry about the light, it's very glossy. It's one of those decks that was released by Lo Scarabeo when they try and catch up with the US games, you know, in that kind of race that they're embarking upon, both of the big producers. And they made really great improvements when it comes to the boxes, but if I may say, when it comes to the cardstock, I'm actually quite disappointed. Thankfully, because it is so glossy, it catches a light, it's not very, I don't necessarily like it. It doesn't clamp up though when you shuffle them, and it does fan out really well. But this kind of cardstock was kind of, I think, used in a few of those decks that came out with these type of boxes, but then thankfully they actually moved on to a more matte cardstock like the Symbolic Soul Tarot, which is one of my favorite cardstock. So as you can see, this is the Six of Swords. We got the upright position, which is the one we're used to, right? It's the one we're used to see in other decks as well. But if you see this at the bottom of the card, we also have as an image which looks as if the upright position or image would have been capsized. So basically, if we tilt the card upside down, we see a slightly different image. The meaning of this deck is to show you in the upright position the usual symbolic traditional RWS, and on the bottom, tilted upside down, some kind of a opposition. So that's hence the name tarot oppositions, which is not necessarily the way in which we always read reversals. I do want to post a video on how I personally read reversals, which is, I think I read reversal in about 5 or 6 different manners. So having just one image is not gonna cut it for me. I always look at all of the cards around it. I look at the position in the spread, at the energies involved, the card before, the card after, also the directionality of some cards around it. But in any case, this one will get you started on your journey into learning tarot, because it will show you one way to read a reversal, which is to see the Six of Swords as if in the upright position is the difficult but necessary journey in which you have to embark upon to go to a better place, even though it feels like it's really like a heavy burden for you right now. The Six of Swords at the bottom of the card, it will show you the impossibility to get on board, because the boat, well, first of all, there's no water because everything is dry. You know, the swords are just sticking out of this kind of, I don't know, swamp, and the boat itself is actually broken. So it will tell you that even though you do absolutely need to take this journey, on the reversal, you cannot. Possibly because you are, I don't know, you have been delayed in some cases, there's obstacles in front of you, or you yourself cannot just find in yourself the courage and the energy to embark upon that difficult journey. So this is a way, a really good way, I would say, for a beginner to start learning how to read reversal. So this tarot deck is excellent for divination because indeed it does show you, it incorporates in one card the 2 different meanings of the card itself, and you will see that on each and every card. So there is another tarot deck that actually does the same, in the sense that in one card it does put together the 2, let's say, refigurations of the upright and the reversed meaning of the cards, and it's called Tarot of Revelations. However, I do not have that deck, and so I cannot vouch for it, in the sense that I never used it. I don't have it, I never used it, and I don't actually know whether that is a good deck or not. As you can see, this deck is a bit all over the place for me, because what happens is that it's one of those few decks that I actually shuffle this way. So I normally shuffle overhand because it's a large deck, but then once I'm done, I actually do this. So as you can see, I actually turn the cards. So once I'm done, or I think that I'm done, I then, you know, smoothen them out like that, and you will see that there will be a few cards that have actually been reversed this way. So that's one way of shuffling, just in case you were wondering, that's one way of shuffling a tarot deck when you want to shuffle, making sure that there's reversed cards in the deck as well. Or you can just simply do the wash up methods, which is this one, but it's a bit messy, and I don't necessarily like it, because when it's a really sturdy tarot deck, then it's fine. But please understand that this is the best way to actually ruin tarot decks, because they will necessarily clash. The cards will necessarily crash one with the other. And if you don't have a sturdy tarot deck, they will start peeling on the edges, which is never a good thing, because once you start doing that, there's no end to that, and it's really the death of a tarot deck. So this is, let's say, one of the examples in which you can use a tarot deck for divination. Whenever you have a tarot deck that it's an RWS clone or even a Marseille, and in this specific case, it's a tarot deck that gives you even something more, because it shows you in one card the upright and the reversed meaning of the cards. But when it comes to oracle, this is when people start thinking that oracle cannot be used for divination. Now, there's a few oracle that you can actually use for divination. And generally speaking, I would recommend always looking for oracle decks that have a keyword at the bottom, not just the title of the card. Because keywords can actually be used as a divination tool. But what I wanted to show you is something that is really, really tongue-in-cheek into the divination category. And it's the Crystal Ball Pocket Oracle by Athena Noctua. And this is a tiny deck, as you can see. It's really affordable. I think that it's about $12 Australian. I could be wrong, apologies for that. But for all of these decks, unless they are out of print, I'll make sure to put the link in the description box below. Now, this is very similar to the Magic 8 Ball, and if you know, it used to be this big black ball with an 8 on top, and you used to have to shake it and then turn it upside down, and there would have been a mechanism inside that was showing you a random answer out of, I don't even know how many. Maybe because it's called the Magic 8 Ball, there would have been 8. I'm not too sure, but one thing that I know, I haven't used it a lot, but every single time, the answer for me was ask again later. And so I got quite upset and stopped using it. But this is very similar. This will give you a very concise answer, and it can definitely be used for divination, because you can ask a question and it will tell you, yes, this is the sign, or go, the time is right, you're going in the right direction, etc. So this is actually really, really good, and it is still called a tarot, an oracle deck, although it is called the Crystal Ball Pocket Oracle, but it will still tell you something to do, or it will give you a direction of something that might possibly happen. And last but not least, in the divination category, again, sorry about the light, this is the answer deck. And as I was saying before, this deck is absolutely crazy. I call it Jumanji. I used to call it Jumanji with a dear old friend of mine that is no longer with us. And it was such a beautiful thing that it was such a well-known thing for me to use this deck whenever she was asking me for something, that when she wrote down a letter of saying goodbye before she passed away, she actually mentioned this deck by calling it Jumanji, and that will always be in my heart, because it was such a lovely thing to do, to just remind me of all the really nice time that we had together, that we spent together by looking at this deck. So this deck, I used it a couple of times, as I said before, in my readings to subscribers. It does have the look and feel of a Lenormand. It's got at least 3 times as many cards. As you can see, it's super old, super heavy used, to the point that, as I was saying before, this deck is just holding up on a prayer because it's just really falling apart. And I'm hoping to find another another one of these, but it is out of print. It was published by Running Press, and it was one of those decks that you could find most of the time in a bookstore at the checkout, one of those impulse buy thingies, because it was tiny and it was really cheap, and sometimes people would just go there and queuing up to pay for your books. You just see this and be curious and want to have a look at what it was without knowing that this is Jumanji. So whenever you start using something like this, you're sucked into the adventure and you have to complete the quest, otherwise you'll never get out. So this deck is absolutely incredible for divination. It will necessarily tell you what's going to happen in the future. Not just that, but the I don't think I've ever shown on a video the actual way in which I use it. So the spread will be like this. It will start, let's see if I fit it on camera. So you have 2 cards for the old past, the past, and then you have a couple of cards here for the present. Then you have a couple of cards here for the future, but this is a close future, distant future, and the final answer to your question. Obviously you can't see it, but it doesn't fit in the camera, but basically it will be used like this. And I can assure you 1000% that if you note it down, if you write down what cards actually came up with that question and you check it, you know, the close future, the distant future, the answer, everything will pan out, everything will be absolutely spot on. And that's why I call it Jumanji. And I think that there's a couple of you reached out to me saying that they do have this deck and they are scared to use it, and that's exactly the same way I feel whenever I use this deck. It makes me a little bit not scary. It's a good kind of scary, but it's so accurate that sometimes you don't want to know. You know what I mean? It's just so accurate. So this is the way in which tarot can be used as a form of divination. Oracle can also be used as a form of divination, and you have all these other cards, decks. You know, I'm thinking about the Sibylla, for example, the love cards. In Italy we have so many decks that are related to the Sibylla. So these divination methods, you have Lenormand for divination as well. So there is something other than tarot if you don't necessarily want to use tarot for divination. But let's have a look at other categories. So another way to use tarot and oracle decks, which is very popular, is for introspection. So any type of personal growth kind of work, which is sometimes, for example, focusing on shadow work, or sometimes focusing on inner child work. Now they're not the same thing, or at least the way I use them. Shadow work will be focusing on some things that are hidden in the shadow, bringing them back to light, assessing them, looking at them, accepting them, and then releasing them if we no longer need them, or nurture them and, you know, make them actually blossom within ourselves if we think that we still need them. That's definitely shadow work for me. Whereas, for example, inner child work is giving the possibility to your own inner child to actually speak up, because most of the time what we'll see in psychology is that whenever we went through that phase in which we were very vulnerable, so all the formative years, we may have gone through trauma, through no faults of our parents or you know, caretakers, or sometimes also because of the relationship with us. But regardless of that, those years are we are very fragile. But it's not necessarily a fragility that is reflected upon the body, because if you notice, actually, children are more resilient than adults. When you grow old, an infection takes weeks to heal. Instead, when I was a kid, for example, my knees were constantly scraped. Because I was climbing trees and, you know, being crazy generally, and I kid you not, I was overnight, I was fine. So the day after, I was ready to scrape my knees again. Now it's nowhere near that. So basically, we are quite resilient when it comes to our bodies, but we are very fragile, very susceptible, we act like a sponge. So any kind of input that we have from the external, from outside of us, is has a very strong influence into our psyche. So letting our inner child speak will actually give us the possibility to understand the way in which we have been living through those years, and look at the trauma that we may possibly have been through, and try and understand it and process it, and then overcome it and use it sometimes to our own strength. So generally speaking, we may think that the job of being a good tool for introspection is given to oracle decks. But I will show you that you can actually do a very good introspective kind of work with tarot decks, and also with what I call the affirmation cards. So let's have a look. First of all, I'm just going to show you the way in which I use the Poesis Oracle, which is a fantastic oracle. This is by Andrea Wan. This is the indie edition because it's the English edition, but I know that there's a French publisher, I think it's Arcana Sacra, I'm not 100% sure, but there is a mass market version of this deck in French. So if you're a French speaker, or if you if you understand French, you can actually get access to this deck in a French version for a mass market price, which is always nice. The quality might be different, obviously. We're looking at a very good quality rose petal finish here, which is not necessarily my favorite, but I have been using this deck so many times that the cards actually don't stick together anymore. Now, if you are familiar with this deck, it's a very similar deck to the what's it called, the Reclaim Oracle. In the sense that it does carry out the same kind of function, the same kind of introspection. It is exceptionally good for, as I said before, shadow work, inner child work. The keywords are just so very conducive and powerful. Some of the images will also be confrontational. What I do find is that, look at this card, the wound card, for example, it's amazing. I do believe that I really do like the Reclaim Oracle as well, but I do believe that the Poesis Oracle probably focuses a little bit more. It is still balanced, but it probably focuses a little bit more on the mind, whereas the Reclaim focuses a little bit more on the body. So if your introspective work needs to focus on the mind more than the body, then I would definitely recommend the Poesis. If you do need to do a lot of work on introspection on your body, I do recommend the Reclaim Oracle. This is a fantastic deck, and it coincidentally, I actually bought it almost without even looking at the cards, because I just looked at a couple of them without realizing what the essence of this deck was, because I was looking for an oracle deck that would pair really well with the Yokai Yochi Tarot, which it really does, but you need to be careful because this deck cannot be just used on a daily basis. It is that powerful, it is that potent, it is that kind of life changes in many cases. So for introspective work, this is definitely a fantastic oracle deck. And this is probably one of the go-to decks. Oracle decks are the go-to kind of card deck that we normally think about when we think about introspective work. But if we look at tarot, then I think you all know this. No, sorry again about the light. I'm just gonna, it is rather dark. Here at the time I'm filming this, it's almost 5 p.m. in Australia, in Sydney, and therefore, because we're going towards winter, it's very dark, so it's almost sunset, and so I have to use artificial light, which means that I have reflection, but that's okay. So we all know this deck is by Patrick Valenza. Is a fantastic deck. I personally absolutely love the artwork. There is a very large hardcover book that comes with it. I mean, no, sorry, it doesn't come with it. You have to purchase it aside. This one is a Los Carabeo. It does come with the little white book. I do recommend, though, if you do love this deck, I do recommend buying the, let's call it like the coffee table book, because it is a fantastic tool that you can pair up whenever you're looking at this tarot. And this is probably the most popular tarot deck, not oracle, so tarot deck, used in any kind of platform in social media. So I've seen it used many times on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, specifically for shadow work. Not that you need necessarily this kind of tarot deck for shadow work, but I just wanted to show you an example of a tarot deck that can be used for shadow work, because normally speaking we would think about using an oracle for introspective work, but we can also use a tarot deck, and this is by far one of my favorite ones for an introspective kind of work. This kind of tarot deck is really digging deep to the point that you really have to be open to the messages, because in some cases they might be quite direct, it might be quite confrontational. Let's have a look at the affirmation cards. So when it comes to affirmation cards, there's so many. There's even, I think there's a series of decks which is called affirmators. And there's like, I don't know, 300-400 cards or something like that. I personally really love the cat gurus, which is kind of similar to the affirmators. I do believe that affirmators also have a bit of a sentence at the bottom, or a couple of sentences and messages at the bottom. I think that these ones are a bit tongue-in-cheek, and therefore that's why I like them. Because we've got a lot of cats, as you can see, but these cats actually kind of look like very famous people, personalities of Grimalkin, okay, the pet rights activist Pussycat, Trim, Tobermory, Kiki La Doucette. So what I mean is that it's kind of mocking a little bit personalities that are famous in the world. And it is quite funny to Hamlet, I love this one, Hank for Senate. It is quite funny to actually have a look at the images on the card, but it's also very introspective if you actually stop and read what it says in the messages. So this one is Simon, and it's a member of the HMS Amethyst, and at the bottom the messages say, "Only a rat will leave a sinking ship. Courage is contagious. Heroes come in all shapes, sizes and breeds." And this is fantastic because, as you can imagine, you kind of had to probably take a step further. So take this card and the messages from this card a bit of a step further, in the sense that with the oracle that we've seen before, the introspective work was very easily accessible. It was right there on the surface because of the images and because of the keywords. And maybe the tarot with the Divination tarot, we already had to take a step further, in the sense that the images were very conducive of introspective work, but we did have to kind of do some kind of a work ourselves. In this case, you probably have to take an additional step further, in the sense that it's not necessarily confrontational when it comes to the images, but when you actually focus on the messages, you will see how strongly in many cases also confrontational, and it is as strongly introspective as you want it to be. So this card, if it comes up in a reading, it's definitely telling you that you should reconsider your position. Perhaps you're sticking to your guns, but you're insecure about that. You're not sure whether you're actually doing the right thing or not, because everyone else around you is, well, leaving the ship. But this will tell you that, hey, by the way, you're a cat and only a rat will leave a sinking ship. You're not supposed to. So you have to stay there, and just be aware that you're not going to be alone, because courage is contagious. And you can be a hero if you want to. So this is really interesting, because you can do that kind of work, introspective work. Just, as you can see, we got Freya and Bastet. Snowball, Hemingway, absolutely fantastic. Friends will keep you afloat in a storm. Celebrate your difference. If you want to eat fish, you have to catch them first. That's a really fantastic kind of message. Passing boots, etc. So this is, to me, these are more like affirmation cards, but you can definitely use them as a tool for introspection, a tool for shadow work and inner child work. And like this one, many others that are very similar to this. But there's another way in which we can use tarot cards and oracle cards and other types of decks, and it is to gain knowledge, to improve our personal knowledge into many aspects of our lives, and therefore getting that kick out of it in order to just start the process of personal growth that we really need. When it comes to learning a deck, I feel that there's a bit of a hit and miss when it comes to tarot decks and oracle decks. There's definitely a lot of tarot decks that give you the possibility of learning a lot. And in this case, I'm going to show you the Parcel Tarot. And there's also a couple of oracle decks that give you that kind of possibility in order to learn something new. But there's also other types of cards. So in this case, I've got the cosmic cards that will give you an insight into astrology. So let's have a look. First and foremost, the Herb Crafter's Tarot. It's one of my favorite decks when it comes to, let's say, wanting to learn something. I'm really interested, especially this year, into learning how to use herbs for my personal well-being. I really look forward to the possibility of actually recognizing all the herbs and knowing what to use them for, knowing how to use them, because that's, it's also the difficult part. And this tarot deck will actually give you exactly that. And on top of everything, I personally think that it's a very beautiful deck. So you don't have the presence of human beings in here, and if I'm correct, you also don't necessarily have animals, although there's a butterfly here, but it's not the main subject. The main subjects will always be plants and flowers, and this is quite important because it is focusing on the healing aspects of these plants and flowers, and how to use them. And the very interesting part is also that for each and every card, because it is a tarot deck, it will also give you the corresponding meaning of the traditional RWS. So for example, we've got yarrow for the Ace of Air, so we do have that recalling the element of air, which is particular of the Suit of Swords, for example, and it will also tell you which kind of plant it is represented in the image. Then if you, for example, go to the book or the guidebook, which is very interesting, if we go to the Ace of Air, we're almost there, 4 of air, 3 of air, it's divided by all the aces together, all the twos, etc. So Ace of Air, here it is. We got yarrow, we got the English name, we got the Latin name, then we got a bit of a sentence that it will ease you into the meaning of the plant. Don't fence me in. Discernment is necessary for survival. Know your wounds, identify your medicine. And then it's really interesting because it describes a little bit of the card, what you can see in the card. There's also a hummingbird, etc. There's a few sword-like yarrow plants filling the base of the thicket, etc. Then it will talk about the specific plant that is on the card. So the first seeds of a new idea can be found just outside your front door, and recalling and reminding you of the meaning of the card in relation to the plant that is represented. Then it will still talk about the crafting with the Ace of Air. So the Latin name for yarrow comes from the myth of Achilles. So a bit of a story behind this plant. Cultivate discernment by learning to identify yarrow and its lookalikes. Craft a powder of dried yarrow leaves to stop bleeding. Now this is fantastic to me because this is not necessarily part of the way in which I would read the Ace of Air, for example, but it's something that I will gain in as a perspective whenever I use and whenever I will be done studying this deck, because I will know one day I will know that apparently yarrow powder will actually stop bleeding. Use it in magical practice to heal wounds that cut to the bone. that is something that I really appreciate. That is something that, you know, it doesn't cost you anything, because yarrow can be harvested, for example. It's something that, obviously, if you live in areas where it grows naturally, but it's something that to me it's very important to understand, it's very important to study. It gives you that possibility to create a bridge between the as we've seen before, the divination essence of a tarot deck, the introspective essence of a tarot deck, but also the studying essence of a tarot deck. So this is the way in which you can study, and it's one of the many tarot deck that can actually be studied to improve your personal knowledge on things. But let's have a look at oracle decks. So an oracle deck that is really interesting when it comes to having a study deck, so studying and taking advantage of the information that you gather by using the deck, is the Energy Arcology Oracle. It's by Ashley Stinson and illustrated by Kelly Finnan. This deck is one of my favorite ones when I have to do some kind of trauma healing kind of spread and work, and I've used it with many clients, and I've always received really good feedbacks. And as a matter of fact, whenever I use it for myself, this deck is actually making me quite emotional, because it always points out, without fail, it will always point out to the part of my body, in the bones, that actually carries the sense of trauma. Now, the concept behind this deck is to really identify the trauma we've been through to a part of ourselves, in specific one of our bones. And this concept stems from the idea that we carry the vibrations and the effects and the side effects of the trauma in specific in our bones. So if we do not heal them, we will never be able to actually process the trauma. That's a revolutionary concept for me, because as you can imagine, with a lot of preparation on psychology, psychology will eventually have a look at the body of the person. For example, if the person is in pain, there will be some attention given to the pain or the specific part of the body where the pain originates. But it's generally something that you know, looks at talking therapy and recollection of trauma in the past, etc., without necessarily understanding or making that bridge, making that connection with the bones that sustain us, that form our structure, and the trauma that we've been through. This deck will help you do just that. And apart from that, it's actually a really beautiful deck. I really like it. It's an indie deck. I hope it's still in stock. As always, I will put the link in the description box below. But as you can see, I really like the color palette. I like the art style. It's very nice. And one thing that I really appreciate about this deck is that you've got not just, you know, the image on the card, but you also have a very clear keyword. In this case, it says visioning. And then there will be a reference at the bottom to that specific bone that the keyword is referring to. So visioning is referred to the right orbital socket. So if we go, for example, to the guidebook, which is excellent, and it does come with the oracle, by the way, because in some cases you may have to purchase it on the side, but in this case it actually comes included in the price. So visioning will be here, so you got a bit of a description, and then what I really appreciate, you've got the mentioning of the elements. So visioning in this case is referred to earth, water and air. In balance, it means foresight, visionary, trust. When it's out of balance, it points out to reactionary and distrustful. So the associated cards will be allowing expectation, informing, inspiration, perspective and wisdom. But what I really think is very interesting is that you'll have all this part here, in which there is a short description of the anatomy of this very specific bone. So the orbital sockets, also called bony orbits or eye sockets, are pyramid-shaped cavities in the skull with the apex pointing inward, and so on and so forth. And this is absolutely fantastic. If you're not into anatomy and you want to skip ahead, then obviously you will go to the next page here, where we'll see, for example, mentioning the energy of this card, the wisdom. So a couple of words about the description of the card. And there's also a couple of prompts just in case you want to not just study this deck, but also use it for meditation, for example. So what visions do I hold that seem out of place within the context of my life? Because it's referred to visions. Contemplate your biggest, most unrealistic vision, who decided it was unrealistic, and so on and so forth. Let me tell you, once you get to the point in which you select one card, that is definitely enough. You don't want to use this deck too much, in the sense that it is very powerful, it is very deep, and the work that you're supposed to do by following this book is also very, very deep. So it's not a deck that you would use for example, for divination. I really don't think that it's very conducive for divination. It is used in many, many cases for shadow work and inner child work. But what I do believe in is that you can actually study this deck in order to be able, once that you know enough, to make the necessary connection between the bones and the essence of the cards, the meaning of the cards. So for example, the ischium is related to release, the palatine bone to rest, the ankles to refine, and so on and so forth. And this deck is just absolutely amazing for that. It's a really beautiful deck to study. So another deck I wanted to talk to you about today, when we look at the study deck category, is the Cosmic Cards. I think this is quite recent. I only got it probably last week. So this is by Maisie Bristol. However, it's including a very good astrology book and also a tarot deck. Although the quality, let me tell you, the quality of the tarot deck is not the best, in the sense that it's very papery. It's not very sturdy. And if you don't really like the this kind of not necessarily sturdy decks, not really the decks that can take up a beating, this is definitely not it. As you can see, it's literally just a paper. It is flexible. It's a beautiful artwork, because this is I think her Instagram account is called Ola Bird, and they're the author of the Avisomnia Tarot as well. So you probably recognize the art style, which is quite similar. I really enjoy this deck. I do, however, know that the first reason why I bought this deck wasn't necessarily because of the tarot, but because of the guidebook. And let me show you what I mean. So this guidebook is absolutely fantastic. It's a chunky monkey, as you can see, and it is indeed a very helpful study deck whenever you want to know a little bit more of astrology incorporated in the use of tarot. So it's not just astrology, it's astrology in tarot, as referred to tarot. Okay, so for example, we've got for the Nine of Pentacles, we've got the reference to the zodiac symbol for Virgo, and in the description is very interesting because it talks about the main characteristics of Virgo. So the Virgo character, this is obviously related to the sun, not the rising, for example, or the moon sign. And I think that it doesn't necessarily go deeply into that. But this is very interesting because it will say, yes, Virgo is a harsh critic, can be a tough lover, but that's only because they hold themselves and those they love to very high standards. The Nine of Pentacles shows the kind of abundant self-love and self-sufficiencies that Virgo expects of themselves, friends, family, and lovers. Note, this is about the self, as self-reliance is everything for this sign. So it will talk about the sign, it will talk about the relation from the sign into the card and the meaning of the card. And it's just the right, I think it's definitely the right way in which we can relate ourselves to tarot by starting from astrology, which is not something that you will see very often. I think that it's actually more common to see the opposite. Sometimes you will have tarot decks that have, for example, the traditional configuration of a tarot card, and then they will have a teeny tiny symbol to point to the planet, for example. In this case, instead, you start from the zodiac sign, and then for that zodiac sign, so for example, are we in Gemini season? Yes, we're in Gemini season. So if we look at Gemini, it will show you the cards that are actually associated to Gemini and why. And it will also tell you for each and every card the way in which we should actually read that card if we start from an astrological perspective and not just from a divination perspective. So even though this is a tarot deck, they call them cosmic cards because it is focusing mostly on the astrological aspects of the tarot, of the cards. And you know, as I said before, the quality is, it wasn't meant to be, you know, a tarot deck with a guidebook. It was meant to be a guidebook that comes with a tarot deck. So you obviously have to, you know, understand that the quality is not the best. However, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. I really, really love this artwork. I love the Abyssomnia as one of my favorite decks. And I was really stoked when I heard that the creator is actually working on another tarot as well. So there'll be news. If you follow their account on Instagram, there'll be news soon about a new project. And I just can't wait because it's absolutely spectacular. So as we've seen, there's tarot decks that can be studied, but there's also oracle decks that can be studied, and there's also, let's call them cards, in this case the cosmic cards, that can be studied in order to gain more knowledge and improve our self-growth. So another way in which traditionally you would have seen people using tarot and oracle and other cards will be for the purpose of meditation. Now, generally speaking, it is believed that for meditation you need to use an oracle. And yes, I do agree that the majority of meditation purposed decks are oracle decks. However, there are a few tarot decks that really are very good at helping with the meditation. And there's cards that you know, they don't necessarily belong to the oracle category. They're definitely not tarot. Talking about the soul cards, and these cards are definitely a fantastic way to ease you into meditation. So let's have a look first of all at these soul cards. So Deborah Chapin, she is a fantastic artist. She is, I believe she's actually the founder of an association where they teach you how to use touch painting. So touch painting is a very unique technique that you know, it combines the traditional way of painting to a technique that sees you using the paint, for example, on a canvas, and then using another canvas on top of the paint. If I hope I'm not wrong, because I've seen it done several times, but I never had to actually explain it. So you have a canvas, you pour paint on top of it, then you pour another blank canvas on top, and with your fingers you trace, let's say, a drawing, something on top of the blank canvas, and then you peel it away, and this the canvas you've just used will maintain the traces of the paint that transferred from the painting to the canvas. I have no idea if I explained myself. I hope it's clear, but in any case, what I'll do, I'll just make sure to link the website in the description box below, so you can actually have a look at how touch painting actually works. It's a very emotional process, what I could see. I watched several videos, and there's a few decks that have been, let's say, made in this with this technique. One of them is called the Portals of Presence, which is a massive, really huge deck, which will have only faces. And I've seen it on Simon's channel, so Simon at the Hermit's Cave channel, and he really loves that deck. It's a very beautiful deck for meditation. So all of these cards, it does call the soul cards. It's actually 1 and 2. What I've done is I just mixed them up together. So this is 2 decks actually, as you can see from the different backings. I mix them up together and I use them in many cases. I will use them for meditation because, as you can see, there are no keywords. You may notice that there are some numbers and letters, and this is because I think a year ago there was this thing going on YouTube in which people were actually choosing cards from these 2 decks combined to create, to make up a magpie deck. Let's say not really magpie because it's only 2 decks from the same creator, but you know, a self-made deck with different cards. And I have actually done that and I really loved the result. But what happened was that I actually found myself not necessarily reaching out for this deck anymore once I did that kind of exercise. And I was actually reaching out, so not as a tarot deck, but I was actually still reaching out for it as a meditation deck. So I just put the cards all back together, and I don't pay necessarily attention to the writings anymore. Well, sometimes I do, because sometimes I really still recognize the images with the meaning that I associated with them. For example, this is the Sun card for me, and this is the World card for me. So it was kind of, and this is the 9 of Wands, and so on and so forth. But if you Google or if you search on YouTube Soul Cards Tarot, because that's where the hashtag that was going around, you'll see there's a couple of tarot tuber that actually made a fantastic work out of it. And as you can imagine, it was really different. The choices were different depending on what the cards actually meant to you, which is fantastic, I think. So this is definitely a meditation deck for me. But I do believe that we have other decks that can actually have that kind of use. So if you look for an oracle deck for meditation, I definitely recommend the Oracle. So this is by the same team. So this is by Jennifer Sudini, but I think it's the same team behind the Modern Nirvana Oracle, which is more recent in publication. I think the came out a couple of years ago. So there's 42 cards. The guidebook is really interesting. The reason why I use this deck for meditation, by the way, the product value is fantastic. As you can see, there's even too much. You know, I don't really need 2 boxes. Sometimes it brings up the price and I'm not necessarily happy about that. But as you can see, so the Oracle, as I was saying, starts with a sentence, each and every sentence at the bottom of the cards with the word I, so the pronoun I. So I advance through my own abilities. I respect the property of others. I honor virtue. I give offerings that are genuine, and so on and so forth. The artwork is absolutely fantastic. I think it's really stunning. It's a bit minimalist, and the color palette is also relatively muted, but not too much. As you can see, there's more colors in some cards, and in other cards there's not. But each and every card will have this. It will start with an I. So it's basically the affirmation that you can start meditation with. So I hold purity in high esteem, and that will be your prompt for meditation. And I can assure you this deck is absolutely fantastic for that. It really is working really well. As a matter of fact, I think that originally I bought it because I really like the artwork, but I tried using it the usual way I would use an oracle, like a wrap-up message at the end of a tarot reading. But this would definitely work a lot better when used for meditation. So I highly recommend this deck for meditation. But when we think about tarot deck, meditation is not necessarily a word that comes to mind now, does it? Instead, I do believe that there's a few tarot decks out there that are very conducive of meditation. In specific, look for tarot decks that incorporate the chakras, for example. That would be definitely very useful for meditation. But one that I really enjoy, and also because it combines two passions of mine, so tarot and walking, because I really love, I'm a walker, I walk everywhere. I do have a driver's license, but I tend not to use it. So whenever I have to go somewhere, I will walk there. And this is the Walking Meditation Tarot by Daniel Norman, and it's absolutely superb. I love everything about it. It's the same author of the Ascension deck. So this deck will come, these are the backs, by the way, really beautiful. It comes with two guidebook, I would say, although one is an actual guidebook to reading the deck, and another is a kind of a walking meditation guidebook. Okay, so this is, for example, let's have a look. Help clear physical pain, walk. Okay, so in this case, you know, you have a need. You want to walk for a reason, and this reason is that you have physical pain. And I can't tell you the number of times in which I actually did walk the pain away. I definitely do that. And to be honest, it's actually working. It's working a lot also because of so from a chemical point of view or biological point of view, when you do exercise, there's a rise in the levels of dopamine in your body. So dopamine is the hormone, they call it the feel-good hormone, and it's sometimes it's like that, but some other times you will want to be careful not to have too high levels of dopamine, because dopamine is also the hormone that makes you take a lot of risks. So there's pros and cons, but whenever it comes to pain, dopamine will definitely help. It will help you raise the threshold of tolerance towards physical pain. So that's why physical exercise, not strenuous one, because obviously, but you know, a gentle walk, a stroll will definitely help you with that. And so you just read, and it's a very personal account from the creator about the way in which walking and meditating go really hand in hand together, and they can be used in different ways. So there could be visualization walks, they could be talk to another soul walk, and they could be cord cutting walk. That's really interesting. Let's begin. So there's a lot of really useful prompts in this guidebook, and then we also have a guidebook for the actual reading of the cards. So you will have, for example, the Four of Wands, new growth brings peace and tranquility, and so on and so forth. This deck is amazing. So if you're not familiar with it, the creator actually took their own photographs. So it actually, I don't know if I can actually show you, because every time that I was looking at this deck online, I did not have a clear idea of the photographic process behind it. So this starts as an actual photo, but then there's a filter that is applied to it. It's difficult to explain. Perhaps you can see it more from this card. It's a fantastic deck. I really enjoy it. The colors are amazing because they are photographic colors, so obviously some natural colors that you can actually find. But one thing that really convinced me, let's see if I can find it, to buy this deck was the Suit of Swords, or rather the Suit of Air, which is entirely composed of, there you go, here we are, of snowy kind of landscape. I come from the northern hemisphere, and I was used to have snow every year for at least a couple of months. I live in Australia now, and we don't have snow here. I mean, where I live, we could go to the mountains. There's one mountain in Australia, the whole country, there's one mountain, Mount Kosciuszko, which is where you can actually find snow. Anywhere else, well, you can't find it. Although in the Blue Mountains sometimes you can, but it's a bit of a hit and miss. But in any case, I miss the snow so much. And so I'm naturally looking for these kind of landscapes, because white landscapes are everything for me. I really, give me a forest and give me snow and a mountain and I'm happy. So I really like this deck. It's one of my favorite ones recently. And I really love the fact that, you know, you can actually use it for meditation. So it's a tarot deck, so you can use it for divination, you can use it for introspection, but you can also use it for meditation. And last but not least, I thought it would have been really fun to show you different ways in which you can use tarot and other card decks. So in this case, we've got the Omegaland, which is a tarot deck and a card game. The Book of Shadows, an Alchemy Story by Andrea Aste, which is actually almost a graphic novel, and it comes with a really excellent book. And this is something that, if you're Italian, you would know what it is. This is the merchant at the showground, let's say, translated loosely. And I don't know, you've probably never seen this, but this deck is actually a deck that is used so many times, especially during the holidays, you know, whenever you have a massive meal and then you're still sitting around the table, you're having your coffee, and all of a sudden grandma comes in and she has this deck and everyone is joining in because it's actually so much fun to play. So I'm just gonna show you. It's a deck that I think is still in print, possibly not from Dal Negro anymore, because I'm not sure entirely that that publisher is still afloat. So it will come obviously with all the rules. It's definitely a card game. There's a couple of different ways to play that. So it comes with 2 decks, as you can see, with different colored backs, although they're very similar. It's just the background color that it's different. It looks like they've almost inverted the colors. And it needs to be used, it's very similar to the way in which you can use the memory card games, because these cards will be the same. So they'll all have a correspondent to these ones with the different backing. And the way in which it works is that it's divided. Let me just see if I can zoom in. So it's divided into categories. You will have birds, as you can see. Then you'll have different kind of animals. Then you'll have flowers. You'll have fruits and veggies. And then you have people or jobs rather. And this is basically, and then you have locations. And this is basically an archetype kind of deck, in the sense that to each and every card there's the corresponding archetype. And playing the way in which you traditionally play is that you need, as a merchant, you have some cards, you've been given at the beginning some cards, and you will have a quest to fulfill. So for example, you need to collect all the bird cards, I don't know, depending on the quest obviously, and you don't necessarily have all of them. So you will you know, do your job. You will trade for the cards that you need with the other players. It's lots and lots of fun, but what's actually really interesting for me is that I actually use this deck. This is an older deck, it's probably 20 years old, so I'm quite happy with the fact that it's not really ruined. But I actually use it to familiarize myself with the characteristics of these archetypes. So obviously you have a lot of oracles. If you think about King Kranz's the animal oracle, I don't remember the name, but you'll have a lot of oracle decks that have animals. You'll have a lot of tarot decks with animals, and there's many animals that actually have intrinsic in the meaning of the card the very own characteristic. For example, this is written in Italian, but this is actually a cockatoo, for example. So we'll have this idea of the cockatoo talking back to you. So it's a very noisy bird, it's a very nosy as well bird, it's a very smart bird because you can actually produce human sounds and everything. So you will have that kind of archetype that in many cases, you know, associates an animal to a perhaps even a divinatory meaning. Like, for example, the tiger is representing strength, but also aggressiveness and other things. And obviously, when it comes to plants, you will have a divinatory meaning for the plants as well, and the same goes for the archetypes that are represented by the job. So you will have, you know, the farmer, for example, and so on, and the artist, and so on and so forth. So this is, I think it was a bit of a way that we had in Italy in order to you know, make fun or give a bit of a different perspective to the way in which we used decks in a divinatory meaning, in a divinatory way. So Italy has got a very strong tradition of using tarot cards and also other kind of decks for divination, but we also like to have fun using them, and I thought that this was worth mentioning because it's an actually really funny kind of game. Another deck, and in specific a tarot deck that actually literally comes as a tarot deck and a card game, is the Omegaland. Now this one, I'm sorry to say, I actually found out recently that it's actually out of print. It used to be published by US Games, and I think that, well, mine is from 2014, and they may have stopped there. I don't know whether they actually, maybe they did one print run and then there was no need to reprint, and then they just stopped there, which is a pity because, to be honest with you, it's actually a lot. It's a very interesting deck because of the possibilities that it gives you to gain an insight into the way in which you read the cards by using it as a game. So you will have, for example, leader goals. Obviously these will be distributed, and then obviously you'll have there's a bit of a action that is assigned to each and every card, as you can see. So it will tell you the scoring. I played with it, as you know, following the instructions. I can actually tell you that it's not the easiest card game I've ever played. I don't think it's difficult for the instruction to understand the instructions. Simply, it's just that it's not necessarily intuitive, and so you kind of do need to play perhaps 3 or 4 times in order to be able to actually master the game. But other than that, it's a very beautiful deck. I actually really like it. It's got its own quirky kind of vibe. As you can see, it's set in a sort of hypothetical dystopian future where there's only survivors left. The cards will have their depiction in a very I would say like a clone from the traditional RWS system, but they will be very straightforward in their figuration. If you do know your RWS, you will have absolutely no problem in understanding the meaning of these cards and the reason why these images have been chosen to signify those cards. And I really like it. It's such a pity that they're not reprinting this, because I've actually seen it traded for, not traded, but sold on a Facebook group for like $150, which is really a pity. But just to show you that even tarot decks can actually be used as a card game. And last but not least, let me show you this deck. This deck is absolutely amazing because I really love Andrea's artwork. He's Italian. He lives in London, and he's also the author of the Tarot of Shadow and Light. If you're familiar with it, I don't have it. I thought I did actually. But let's focus on this one. So this one was a very successful Kickstarter campaign from, I think it was from last year, middle of last year. The reason why it was so successful was because there's a lot that you can find in this book. There's also a movie that will show you the story behind the creation of this deck. And it really does have that feel, that it will feel like an actual graphic novel, you know, whenever you look at the cards. So I'm just going to show you the cards first. I absolutely love his style. I adore it. It's kind of glossy, so I'll try not to catch the light. If you're familiar with the Tarot of Shadow and Light, you will recognize the art style, even though those two decks, because it's actually one title, but it's two decks. One is for shadow and one is for light. They're almost monochromatic. This one is, as you can see, very saturated colors, absolutely brilliant. I absolutely adore this deck. It's so beautiful. I would have got this deck by itself, in the sense that the fact that there is so much work behind it, it's a plus for me. But I would have gotten this deck even if there was just a deck available and no guidebook at all. It is just that beautiful to me. It's absolutely fantastic, and it is because I really love brilliant colors like this. But it's the kind of colors that appeal to me. It's the kind of color palette that I like. So they don't clash. Sometimes there might be a lot of colors that actually clash with each other, and I don't necessarily like that. But look at this dark card. It's one of my favorite. So first and foremost, it's a really, really beautiful deck. But when it comes to the book, so the premises of the book is that there's the story of the alchemist. So the alchemist is the protagonist of the story of the graphic novel, and you will see in this book there's as I said, there's graphic novel here. There's a lot of spreads that you can use. There's a lot of interviews. There's an interview, for example, with Rana George. There's also obviously the references related to all the cards. So it's a bit of a mix between, graphic novel, between the making of kind of process, and a guidebook for the actual tarot deck. And this is, I believe, this is the art style that you could find in the book of, in the Tarot of Shadow and Light, or Light and Shadow, sorry, I don't remember which one comes first. So this is his typical art style, and it's absolutely superb. So I really highly recommend this. I think that I will, as always, I'll put the link in the description box below, but I think that it's still available, even outside of the Kickstarter campaign in his website. It ships out of London, I believe, if I'm not wrong. So this was another example of how you can actually use tarot, outside of the traditional ways, for, divination, introspection, shadow work, inner chart work, meditation, and even fun as a card game. So thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. It's really, really important to me that you reach out and you put your like there and you comment if you feel like it, because I really like this introduction and the creation of meaningful connection with the tarot community out there. So thank you so much, and more to come. Have a great day.